Welcome to the channel, I'm attira.kell, and today we will be updating our previous video on the Aegis Vanguard ship and its ongoing rework. 3.5.1 is finally hit, and with the changes made in this mini patch, I thought it was time to revisit my first video on the Vanguard rework. So, first things first, no, the major changes to the Vanguard discussed by Sig are not in the game yet. That comes in 3.6. We hope. Though, in the debut episode of Pillar Review, Chris Roberts along with John Crew seemed confident that the Vanguard would meet that timeline. But there has been some progress made, which I'll show you here, and then we'll talk about how the Vanguard feels in the game at the moment in 3.5.1. So to begin, in that first Pillar Review, Chris Roberts stated that basically, the Vanguard has gone from an update to a wholesale rework. John Crew followed that about 10% of the interior and 20% of the exterior remain from the original ship. We do have some footage of the work they are doing, as you can see here. You can immediately see that there is now a purpose for the area directly behind the pilot's chair in the form of components, and of course the crew compartment has seen a complete rework. Adjusting to the hoplite hull has opened up the space to allow you to get around to the pilot's area while someone is simultaneously getting into the top turret. Additionally, they have reworked the interior with lockers for weapons and clothing, and given the bathroom a more tactical overhaul. No more frosted glass. For the exterior, Sig has gone back to the original concept and are now including a wheeled front and tracked rear landing gear, as well as a retractable turret. The rear of the ship has been completely reworked as well, reworking the more fuselage-like reinforcement for the engines to a more strut-based look that is intended to create a sense of weight and strength as these struts reinforce the Warden's larger engines. Perhaps most important, they have moved the Size 2 missiles from under the wings between the fuselage and the engine to the top of the ship, using a type of headlight-based panel to raise up and for the missiles to fire. This of course clears the road for my preferred course of action, which is to place fixed size 4 or gimbaled size 3s in that location in order to greatly increase the Vanguard's forward-facing firepower. Overall, I like where the designers are headed, with one exception. If you look at the port side rear area of the crew quarters, you'll note that the Harbinger has its torpedoes, and presumably the Sentinel will have its electronics warfare package. And the Warden? The Warden gets a kitchenette. This is where I take issue. I cannot imagine a world in which a kitchenette and a torpedo bay take up the same amount of space. So I propose this. Sig, go back and add some additional components to the Warden behind or beside that kitchenette space. Maybe an additional set of coolers, or a second size 1 power plant. This would, oddly enough, serve to better support the weapons loadout changes I'd like to see. I might even argue that only the Warden would have these hardpoints and components. Let me briefly explain. I've never liked the idea of a base variant for any ship. I won't go down the rabbit hole of balance in this video. However, my bottom line on the Vanguard series is that the Warden should be better than the other variants at dogfighting, specifically because it is more of a fighter variant versus having a separate specialty. Now, moving on from the cosmetic changes being made, let's talk about the overall performance in 3.5.1. I wanted to wait to release this video until Sig had fixed the fixed bug with the guns, and now that they have, I feel we can talk about the combat effectiveness of the Vanguard. First, let's talk shields. With the new flight model and rebalance, the Vanguard feels much more tanky than it previously did. After several rounds of both Vandal Swarm and Pirate Swarm, I feel I can safely say that the ship does not suffer from a lack of shielding. Very rarely, if ever, did my shields drop lower than 50%. This is certainly a move in the right direction for a ship that is billed as a heavy fighter on the website. Though, in the most recent jump point, it was referred to as a deep space fighter. Developer Richard Towler stated in that article that while it may not be the most maneuverable ship in the universe, it packs a punch with a heavy weaponry and armor. So it still falls within that heavy fighter category, I think. However, where the Vanguard still runs into trouble is the predilection for NPCs to transition to ramming as an offensive technique. Now, in Pirate Swarm, this isn't really an issue. Sig seems to have really nailed the fact that human pirates likely won't be super interested in ramming you when it will result in their death as well. The Vandal, on the other hand, are an entirely different story. We all know, of course, that the Vandal ships have blades mounted on them solely for the purpose of ramming. I do not have an issue with this in the slightest, but the Vanguard does. Now, I would love to show you what I'm talking about in Vandal Swarm, but an interesting bug of my own has shown up and I can't draw my Warden in Arena Commander anymore. Essentially what happens is that when you lose an engine housing, you go into an uncontrollable spin. When I first encountered this in Vanduul Swarm, I was spinning so fast it was hard to look at the screen. What I can show you is a much less extreme but no less debilitating spin I encountered in Pirate Swarm. In this case, the pirate shot off the housing fairly with kinetic weapons, and here I am spinning completely out of control. So, back to the Vanduul. For a ship that has seen, and I quote, extensive service fighting against the Vanduul, this seems like a serious flaw in the design. So here again, I call on the SIG team. Given the lore, you cannot have the loss of a single housing result in a complete crippling of the Vanguard. Firstly, it makes for horrible gameplay. And secondly, it doesn't really fit within your own lore to have a ship with such a massive vulnerability fight the Vanduul. Please adjust the thrusters on the exterior of the Vanguard to be capable of compensating for the loss of an engine housing. Finally, let's talk a little bit about firepower. I fly dual stick, and it has been said by many that the gimbal assist is really a boon for those who fly stick. I must say that from my perspective, this is true. The size 4 nose weapon has proven to be a far more effective tool using gimbal assist than it was previously. I can focus on employing the 4S2 nose weapons while trusting with a moderate level of confidence that the S4 will land rounds on target. Between the fixed weapons shooting where they're supposed to, and the gimbaled S4 tracking the target with gimbal assist, I find myself hitting and killing targets far more consistently. So this is a fairly significant improvement. I will close with this thought. SIG has not said a word about any loadout changes to the Vanguard series. I still hold that the ship does not have enough forward-facing guns. Now that they have shifted the size 2 missiles to the top of the ship, I think that this is the perfect time to hang those standard size 4 hardpoints under the wings. Let the pilot choose to either gimbal or keep them fixed. It would mean that the Vanguard series of ships would once again pose a real threat. And that's it. If you stuck around at the end, thank you. And if you like my ideas on the Vanguard, give me a like. And don't forget to check out some of the other videos on the channel, as well as the Ammo Discord link in the description down below. I'll see you in the next one.